Begin with this breaking and still developing story. Former President Donald Trump is scheduled to appear in a federal court in Washington tomorrow following his latest indictment.
Now, this is the third time this year that the former president has been charged with a crime. This case is related to the January 6th insurrection. He is charged with 4 total counts for allegedly attempting to overturn the 2020 election results. Now, they include 3 conspiracy-related charges and 1 count of obstructing or attempting to obstruct an official proceeding.
Now, what's interesting is the 45-page indictment also includes 6 listed unindicted co-conspirators. They remain officially unnamed. Special counsel Jack Smith unveiled the charges just last night, prompting a quick response from the Trump legal team.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government.
Everything that President Trump did was with the advice of lawyers and counsel. That's an absolute defense to a criminal case. Now, you may disagree about policy or disagree whether or not he made the right decision, but this is the first time that political speech has been criminalized, and they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he had corrupt intent, which they'll never do.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now. Scott, you were there in the court when the indictment was handed up. Tell us, what does tomorrow look like? Is the president expected to actually come in for his arraignment?
It's a great question, Lana. I think the bigger question, though, is does the former president want to be there in person? It's likely going to be his choice. The court has allowed January 6 defendants, high level, low level, to make initial appearances virtually through Zoom. And we know this in part because we've seen them on the Zoom screen in the courthouses do so. In fact, there were 3 January 6 defendants who appeared virtually for the first time yesterday, just before the grand jury came in with their indictment of Donald Trump. So it's likely the court will allow, if not encourage, Donald Trump to do a virtual appearance to begin this case. But if the former president wants to be there in person, it's likely he'll be afforded that opportunity too. But let's also give a sense of the courthouse itself. It's huge. It's like the size of a basketball arena, 6 floors, dozens of courtrooms, but everywhere inside, cameras are prohibited. Nobody can get a photo inside. And outside, there'll be cameras aplenty, but high-profile defendants, certainly including a former president, would likely be ushered underground through a tunnel system. So if he's here for a photo op tomorrow, if he seeks an in-person initial appearance, there's no photos to be taken for somebody brought underground into a camera-free zone.
And we should highlight for our viewers, Scott, that of all the legal troubles the former president faces, this seems to be the most serious, as it strikes at the heart of American democracy and the Constitution, this alleged conspiracy to overturn the will of the people. Tell us about the judge, Judge Tanya Chutkan, appointed by former President Obama. She will be handling this case, and as you've noted previously, she takes a particularly strong stance in sentencing January 6 defendants. What more can you tell us?
Not only does she take a strong stance in sentencing, Errol, she takes a uniquely strong stance. There have been only a handful of cases in which the judges here in Washington, D.C. have exceeded the recommendations at sentencing by prosecutors in January 6 cases, and we've watched it happen most often in Judge Chutkan's courtroom. In fact, it happened twice in the same month, in July 2022, and having sat through hundreds of these hearings, dozens of sentencings, I can tell you unequivocally, the most strident, noteworthy denunciations of January 6th, all that led up to it, all that happened that day, have come from that judge, Judge Chutkan. She gets this case because it was randomly assigned. They have what they call a wheel at the courthouse. It's not really a wheel. It's kind of an old-fashioned term for this computer mechanized system that randomly assigns cases. The next case in is randomly assigned to a judge, likely a judge who has a lower caseload at that moment in time, the moment being yesterday. Judge Chutkan's name came up. This is her case after tomorrow's appearance before the magistrate judge who handled the grand jury indictment yesterday.
Important point that is a random assignment. So, Scott, how is the former president responding?
Well, the former president has responded in a way that is symmetrical to how other Republicans have responded, saying this is politicized and an effort by the Biden administration to dethrone a 2024 frontrunner. We'll see what he says tomorrow, if he speaks after making the appearance.
All right, Scott MacFarlane, thank you very much. And of course, there's a lot of discussion about the potential co-conspirators in this criminal case against former President Trump.
CBS News has obtained the identities of what is believed to be 5 of the 6 alleged co-conspirators in the case. According to the indictment, the first co-conspirator's description fits that of former President Trump's ex-attorney, Rudy Giuliani. The conduct of the second unnamed co-conspirator is believed to have devised and attempted to implement a plan to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Now, that description seems to be Trump's legal advisor, John Eastman.
The other unindicted co-conspirators appear to include Trump attorney Sidney Powell, Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, you see them on the screen, and another Trump campaign-related attorney, Kenneth Chesborough. For more on the legal ramifications of this latest indictment against the former president, we're joined by Nick Lewis now. You see him there. He's a founding and managing member of the Lewis Law Firm, and he specializes on government inquiries. Great to have you with us today. The Trump legal team has been focusing on effectively deflecting his responsibility and say he's just following the advice of his lawyers. Why haven't these co-conspirators then been charged?
Well, thanks, Errol, and thanks, Lana, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think that's a fantastic question. You know, I think the special counsel, Jack Smith, could be making an important strategic decision here. Obviously, you all and others have identified who these co-conspirators likely are, but they haven't been named or they haven't been charged. Now, they still could be, and the government very much would be looking for them to cooperate and might seek to pressure them. And they may be doing this in sort of 2 ways by not naming them in the indictment. First, they're sort of making it real so that these individuals will see their conduct, explained in detail throughout a federal indictment that sort of makes it more real for them and understanding what they may face. Now, second is, as you also alluded to, is it sort of flushing out this advice of counsel defense that the former president might be asserting. And if you're one of those attorneys, you might start to feel like, oh, maybe I'm about to be thrown under the bus. And maybe loyalty doesn't work 2 ways with the former president. And so that might make it more likely that those individuals could attempt to cooperate with the special counsel.
Nick, the January 6th committee report was hundreds of pages long. This indictment was 45 pages. Help us understand what that means about Jack Smith's investigation, what's being shared, or what's being really withheld at this moment.
Well, thanks, Lana. A lot is clearly being withheld. I mean, the select committee in January 6th produced a report that was hundreds of pages long. Certainly, the special counsel has developed additional evidence on top of that. They've had access to witnesses that the select committee did not have. Here, hard to speculate, but I think that the special counsel was going for sort of a concise, tight indictment that would sort of clearly lay out this 5-part plan to sort of overturn the presidential election in ways that I think people will understand. This is a speaking indictment. There are a lot of details. And yesterday, when the special counsel gave his press conference, he urged all Americans to read it. I think he wants people to sit down. He wants to see this plan play out involving, state officials, fake electors, pressuring DOJ, pressuring the vice president, and ultimately directing a mob to march to the Capitol to sort of further interfere with or impede the certification. So, I think he was trying to make it readable and understandable. Can certainly add more detail to it, and we can expect to see a lot more evidence at trial.
Yeah, it certainly spells out a very clear narrative. Of course, we've been reading it. We encourage viewers at home, if you care about democracy, in this case, read it yourself. What jumps out at me is on page 2, Jack Smith writes that the defendant has a right, like every American, to speak publicly about the election and even claim falsely that there's been an outcome of fraud. But Trump's lawyers have been making a First Amendment argument already. What do you make of that?
It's a great question. On page 2 as well, it sort of contrasts that the former president had a right, like every American, to talk about the election or even to lie about the election. The very next paragraph goes on to talk about the illegal means by which the former president and these co-conspirators try to overturn the results of the election. There's a lot of discussion throughout the indictment about evidence that the former president allegedly knew that these, election fraud claims were false, that they weren't actually true. And, there's a lot of statements in there, a lot about, what the president had said. Now, his defense team is coming out there. They're saying, First Amendment, they're saying political speech. Well, a lot of that is really aimed at going towards intent. It's showing that there is evidence that the special counsel has found and is going to bring forth, showing that he knew these claims are wrong. But the indictment also goes further, and it talks about specific acts or conduct and how they sort of weaponized those sort of false election claims in order to pressure people to do things that are unlawful. And so there is an element of speech here, but there's also, charged conduct of illegal acts.
And the special counsel claims the president was told over and over again by his own team, by his own advisors, that he lost the election legitimately, and he didn't believe them, or, well, we'll find out. Nick Lewis, great to chat with you on this. We could talk for hours. We appreciate your time today.
Terrific. Thank you so much.